Hey guys, just thought I would add this little segment to the start of the video because all the filming and recording happened before everything that's sort of happened in Australia within the last week, so I thought it would be a good idea just to add my little bit on the situation. So coronavirus is all over the world at the moment, and it is killing a lot of people, those who are more vulnerable or elderly. And in Australia tomorrow, a lot of the states are closing their borders, as well as introducing a lot of measures, including shutting down pubs, restaurants, local swimming pools, all that sort of thing. So I'm currently in self-isolation. Last night I flew in from a short trip in the eastern states, just to see some friends and family. So it was definitely a bad time to travel, but when I left, things were relatively normal, but it was a very anxious trip away, watching the news every day and watching the situation get worse and worse. So we flew in last night. I was supposed to fly in tonight because of the borders closing. But on my boss's recommendation, even though I'm not currently sick, he says, and I agree with him, that it would be a good idea for me to just stay home for the next couple of weeks, which will be good for the YouTube videos, of course, but also for the health and well-being of my workmates and just the people at large, because my job does require me to travel a little bit. So I think if you are able to work from home, or you can afford to stay at home, I personally definitely think you should. There's a lot of people not taking this very seriously. They just think it's the flu or the common cold, but it's a lot worse than that. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, obviously, so I can't go too into depth about how bad it really is, but I think people should definitely be taking it seriously and should be restricting the time they spend with others. We have the internet these days. We can watch Netflix together. We can be completely separate houses, online gaming. And I also just want to quickly mention people hoarding stuff at the supermarkets, which is pretty crazy in its own right, and is probably the one thing from this virus that is affecting the majority of the population. So I can't speak for other countries, but in Australia, we create something like 80% of our own food supply. And the toilet paper in particular is something like 60%, which is what ran out first. So I think people just need to calm down a little bit. The food and the supplies are there. It's just the shopping centres are having distribution problems at the moment. I can't speak for other states in Australia, but in WA and in Melbourne, Victoria, where I just was, they're changing laws so deliveries can happen at night. So that should curb this a little bit, but I think people just need to calm the fuck down. It's hoarding. It's not going to help anyone. And do you really want a room full of toilet paper? A lifetime supply of toilet paper doesn't really make sense. I had to scab toilet paper off my mum. So yeah. So obviously coronavirus, nothing to do with this video. This is Tomb Raider, of course, but I just thought it would be right for me to add this, and I will. You can skip this if you want, or if you're watching this in the future when this is all hopefully blown over. But yeah, I just wanted to add that little bit. Stay safe, use your common sense, and also, lastly, just support local businesses where you can, because there will be a bad economic factor to this as well. So local places, there's still restaurants and stuff, they're still allowing takeaways. So I think where responsible, you should still support the local business by getting takeaway or getting food delivered. Because obviously the virus will pass. I don't know when, but it will. And my light just ran out of battery. But yeah, the economic impact is very worrying by itself as well. So yeah, gotta feel weird sort of saying all this. I've never really added this sort of conversation to a video before, but if you listened, thank you for listening. Enjoy the video. I've made no secret over the years about how much of a PlayStation fanboy I am. It's one of my biggest personal collections, stemming from the fact that it was my very first home console when I was just a wee Brendy. There is 8,000 games available on the PlayStation 1, and I like to think I've played nearly all the big ones. But there's one title has always eluded me. I rarely buy games online, instead opting to find them in the field, garage sales, swap meets, etc. And while I have nearly every single Tomb Raider game over several console generations, the first one has never revealed itself to me affordably. Bad luck, I guess. But being such the fanboy purist I am for my beloved PS1, I had to play them in order, PS4 reboots excluded. So, I did what I had to do. eBay. It was only 20 bucks. I also bought the smancy but useless dual CD black label copy, so I have extra space for my 1996 era top 40 mix CD, which is pertinent since that's the exact year the original Tomb Raider was released. Developed by Core Design and published by Eidos Interactive, it was also released on the PC and the Sega Saturn. The Saturn version was actually released first thanks to an exclusivity agreement with Sega, though that version was developed simultaneously with the one on the PlayStation. Bugs were found on the Saturn version after release though, unfortunately. However, these were fixed on the impending PlayStation release. So, sorry Sega fanboys and fangirls, but this is the superior version to play on console. Lara Croft and Tomb Raider became a phenomenon, a fighting force in the industry that still persists to this very day. So, come with me now, as we delve into how this all began nearly 25 years ago. World, meet Lara Croft. Lara, meet world. Lara is an archaeologist adventurer, but definitely erring more on the adventuring side, since I doubt she believes that the loot she plunders from tombs belongs in a museum. This original incarnation of the game has quite the in-depth storyline for a pre-DualShock title, of which I very loosely followed in the well-made, but incredibly short cutscenes you receive every few hours. I only really pieced it together towards the end of my playthrough while I was researching and starting this very script. Regardless, after a man named Larson smacks down a magazine advertising Lara stamping out Bigfoot, which is a prequel I'd love to play, Lara is shown being rudely interrupted as she is trying to enjoy a book in an expensive looking hotel in Calcutta. What does old boy Larson want? Well, he represents one Jacqueline Natala of Natala Technologies, who through some sort of pre-Skype wizardry convinces Lara to recover an artifact called the Scion, which is something Great Power Atlantis. This journey covers many locations with betrayal and intrigue, and will suit anyone that's into Indiana Jones or the Uncharted series. And hey, what do you know? That's me! Not only was the story liked by the press and players alike in the mid-90s, everyone became infatuated with the character of Lara Croft. Originally intended to be a South American adventurer named Laura Cruz, she developed into the smart and powerful, proper English woman we all know and love today. She started to pop up everywhere in pop culture, from appearing in Lucozade commercials and on the cover of The Face magazine to having her visuals used in a world tour by the band U2. Lara Croft transcended gender norms in the video game industry at the time. The character even had a series of subpar movies based around her starring none other than Angelina Jolie, and all these years later, the series and the character are still going strong. As of the making of this video, 2018's Shadow of the Tomb Raider is the most recent release. I have to say though, I kinda dislike the modern incarnation of Lara Croft's character. Far removed from the dual pistol wielding badass I played as in this game, the most recent iteration of her personality reveals a trust fund kitty with severe daddy issues who has no regard for anyone's life except for her own. She also whines non-stop, mostly about the realization of how terrible she has become, yet she continues her destructive path regardless. Poor Jonah. But I digress. Back to the game at hand. This version of Tomb Raider doesn't differ too much from its more modern counterparts, as the gameplay is cleanly split between shooting things and puzzling platforming. What I will recommend, however, is the tutorial. If you've never played this before, it's downright essential, as the controls are straight up baffling if you just jump straight in. This is set in Croft Manor, and throughout its large cavernous rooms, Lara will take you through the different types of platforming. Since the game is from 1996, there is no analog stick support, so go in expecting tank controls. Lara has a simple stationary jump where you can either go straight up or out in a certain direction. This is simple enough as you can fine tune your position using the digital buttons, but it's the run and jump I struggled with first booting up this game, especially if you need to run and jump and then grab onto a ledge mid-air. With tank controls, Lara lives in a mostly 90-degree angular world, so expect trouble if anything is at 45 degrees. The key to everything is the walk button. I wish I had read the manual or something before I started playing, as it would have avoided a lot of initial frustration. By default, Lara runs and leaps around like she's been binging on red cordial, but if you hold down that simple button, she'll traverse the small surface areas for the dexterity of my cat. Also note, she can't accidentally walk off the edge of a platform and fall while walking, which is enormously useful if you need to get as much run up as possible. I kept falling off platforms until I figured that out, wondering how the hell I was going to make it through the entire game. Read the manual, kids. The platforming in Tomb Raider is not intended to be fast paced and, well, quick. You'll find yourself very deliberately and methodically navigating the levels to get to where you need to be, which can be annoying and repetitive if the checkpoints are far apart. But on the plus side, the game really tightens the screws on you. There are a lot of things trying to kill you, but for the most part, you can take as much time as you want to complete the platforming successfully. Once you figure this all out, the platforming becomes a bit of a joy, calming even. But being the early 3D action-adventure game it is, there are expected troubles with the period to arise. As you'd expect, the auto camera struggles to effectively show what you want to see. There were many times I backed up on a platform next to a wall for a run and jump, only for the camera to rotate and face Lara. Not exactly helpful when you need to see exactly where to hit that jump button. The responsiveness of the buttons was a bit fickle at times too. There were many times I went for the run and jump, and the game wouldn't read the button press in time, resulting in Lara falling to her doom. Lara is also a proficient swimmer, and for the most part, navigates the aquatic environments with ease considering the digital controls. She's able to hold her breath for quite a long period, which makes these segments much more tolerable than similar 3D games from the 90s. However, she's awful at picking up items underwater. I'm not sure what the trick is, but you need to be in a very perfect position, floating but not moving, to pick items up. There's no equivalent to the walk button while swimming either, and Lara's breaststroke moves her about a meter per button press, so overall it is a very frustrating experience. Many times I gave up trying to pick something up, lest I ran out of air. While the platforming and climbing is generally a puzzle in itself, much like one of my all-time favourite games, Mirror's Edge, there is more traditional puzzling at play. This is simple for the most part, exploring until items like keys are found, that sort of thing, nothing that will hurt your noggin too much. You are required to keep a watchful eye on the environment as you progress, however, as it is super easy to walk right past what you've been looking for. I found the graphics to be decently detailed overall, but small objects can certainly merge into the environments. There are also movable parts of the terrain that can certainly be mistaken as solid, more so since the design of which is not consistent between levels. Lara also pushes and pulls them in a very annoying way. There is a very drawn out animation for each portion she pulls or pushes that can't be escaped from if you activate it by accident. It's also bothersome how she'll only pull or push so far before stopping, and you have to go through the entire routine multiple times just to get where you need it. These and more tricky optional platforming will lead to several secret areas per level. These contain loot to collect like ammo and health packs. You certainly don't need to find these to play properly, they just contain more of the same that will be found all over the levels, but it is satisfying to discover them nonetheless. Platforming and puzzles are one huge portion of the gameplay, but this is evenly split with combat. It's nice how the game rarely mixes the two, providing plenty of cooling off periods between the gunplay, a game design style that Half-Life would standardize a few years later. Lara wielding her dual pistols have become an iconic image, which makes her look like an absolute boss. By default, these pistols have unlimited ammo, so you don't have to rely on scavenging to make ends meet, but there are more powerful guns like a shotgun and an Uzi that are damn well essential in the later levels. The ammo for these is limited, but luckily the game doesn't go to too much effort to hide the majority of it. I don't think I ever ran out of ammo in the last few levels either, come to think of it. The game absolutely showers you with clips. So, what does Lara shoot? Well, mostly things that can't shoot back. She doesn't muck around with the slaying of wild animals. She most certainly is not a member of PETA. And who are feeding all these animals that reside in sealed tombs where no one has supposedly set foot in years? Is it a self-sustaining ecosystem? Do the bears eat the bats? Regardless, they don't like Lara and will go to any length to bite her in half. Luckily, their teeth are usually their only weapon, and for the most part, they can't follow you up ledges. This means if you can scramble to a safe advantage point in time, usually you can just knock them off out of harm's way from above. The enemies aren't just restricted to animals, however, as the game takes surprising turns at times. How about mummies, Atlantean monsters that spew fireballs, or even a goddamn T-Rex? Not only were the dinosaurs a surprise, but they were also still effective at being terrifying. I'm not sure if it's the less than stellar draw distance or what, but having that beast charge at you from out of nowhere certainly got my heart racing. It was also successful at blocking your path and getting in the way as you try to run for your life, kind of like how a cat will behave in the morning when it wants to be fed. Lastly, there are actual people you can shoot too, although these are relegated to boss fights. It should be mentioned that the gun mechanics include auto-aim, which I see as a very thoughtful design decision because of the lacking thumbsticks. You won't kill most of these guys first go. As it turns out, an enemy having the ability to shoot back is a real bummer. The best strategy is to keep moving, running, jumping and gunning, but be careful doing this as most of the environments you fight these foes in include pits to fall in that will kill you instantly one way or another. Of course, another strategy is to hoard health packs, then just stand there, shooting point blank until they die. Health packs can be accessed at any time in the inventory, and this will pause the game. But what's the fun in that? I just did it a few times as a last ditch tactic if I was sick of dying and reloading. That brings up a point of note, the saving and checkpoint system. Saving is possible through what are called save crystals that are scattered around the levels at mostly sensible intervals. These can only be used once, however, which means you can potentially screw yourself over in the less linear levels. If you've never played before, like me, it can be very tempting to save as soon as you see one. This is certainly a no-brainer in the linear, corridor-like sections, but if the exploration is open-ended, hitting that save button could cause you trouble later on. That particular save crystal is intended for a portion of the game that takes you on a loop from an open area and then back again. You're really rolling the dice in these instances, resulting in frustrating periods where you must repeat huge portions of the game until you finally make it to another crystal. Tomb Raider is a very quiet game. I have a feeling this is on purpose, not because of technological constraints. We are in the world of the CD-ROM by then after all. I have a hunch it's for a dramatic effect to emphasize the lonely and barren environments, with short bursts of impactful music playing at key times. It's a shame then, since most of the audio is made up of gunshots, footsteps and Lara grunting as she climbs, as these short snippets are actually quite good, playing along seamlessly with the mood the game tries to convey. If you're into podcasts, I highly recommend one called The Retro Hour, who recently interviewed Nathan McCree, who was the composer at Core Design back in the day. It's an interesting discussion to hear, since there is such a small amount of music in the first place. And speaking of The Retro Hour, they also interviewed Heather Gibson, who was the level designer for the first two Tomb Raiders, even being the voice of Lara.
No.
This is another great in-depth look into the earlier releases, and those two episodes combined are partly responsible for me finally starting this original series. And as I've touched on, I was impressed by the graphics and level design. Even though Lara oddly never goes outside, the entire game is contained within caves and tombs, there are wide-ranging locales, including Peru, Greece, Egypt, and, of course, the portion of Atlantis. While the frame rate does struggle in some of the larger areas, the anticipation of exploration is exciting, but also genuinely daunting at times. You can spend a large amount of time in a single area, which I see as a good indication of great level design. The amount of detail is fantastic too. It seems they were pushing the PlayStation to its limits in those earlier days, which might actually explain why there is such little music. The design of the character models is great too, although there are certain parts I won't mention to keep this family friendly. As well as releasing on the Saturn and the PC, a version for the N64 was destined for mid-1998, although obviously this never materialised. Notably, a version appeared on the N-Gage in 2003, and I partly mention that because the other day I found a bunch of N-Gage cases in an op shop, still factory sealed. I have no idea where they could have come from, and I don't personally own an N-Gage, but I bought one anyway. If you wish to play this on something slightly newer, there were ports on smartphones if you can hack that sort of thing, but there's also a remake called Tomb Raider Anniversary released in 2007. This was released on a slew of 6th and 7th generation consoles, so I'm sure you can find it for cheap somewhere. Tomb Raider went on to sell 7 million units, which would have padded the pockets of its developers for sure, ensuring sequels were imminent. Now I won't go into those today as I will be reviewing them in order, but I have to say, even with its limits, especially without thumbsticks, I have been thoroughly impressed by Tomb Raider. From dinos, to skateboarders with Uzis, to freaking Atlantis, OG Tomb Raider had a lot going on. It's easy to see why it's such a cult favourite.